You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
Really became enthralled with the potential for-profit business to try to address some of humanity's biggest challenges and seeing ways that business could be a force for good rather than a force for bad as it is in a lot of the world. Because we work with donors and governments, we are free to take more of a systems level view and an impact orientation. We're running a number of programs trying to cultivate those opportunities for Africans, including trying to fill in some of where infrastructure gaps may be hindering the potential. So I think there's a universe of opportunities that are coming from the green economic promise in Africa.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find amazing people who are doing amazing things to unlock Africa's economic potential. Today we have Paul Breloff, who is co-founder and CEO of Shortlist, which is a company providing a range of talent services to impactful businesses across Africa. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Fantastic. So how's your day so far?
It's going great. I'm here in sunny Nairobi. Things are good. How about you?
I'm here in cold and rainy Liverpool and things are good, but I'm jealous that you're enjoying the nice weather.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know you've listened to the podcast before.
I have.
Before we get started, introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Paul Breloff.
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me on. So I'm an American guy from a small town in Western New York, probably least likely to be living abroad and doing work across Africa when I was young. Didn't have a passport till I was 22. And then since graduating college, I've spent a lot of my career working overseas. I initially did a few things early in my career, advertising, corporate law, but really became enthralled with the potential for business, for-profit business, to try to address some of humanity's biggest challenges and seeing ways that business could be a force for good rather than a force for bad as it is in a lot of the world. And so that led me on a journey through social enterprise. Spent many years working in microfinance and with a high growth microfinance institution in India. Spent some time advising a number of financial inclusion organizations on policy and access to finance and some other issues. And then actually set up an impact investing fund, investing in inclusive fintech startups around the world. This was in around 2011 when it was apparent that banks and telcos weren't going to be the ones innovating and that there was a space for startups to come in and really try out a lot of new ideas around how payments, digitally enabled, small business finance, personal loans, insurance, how all of that could be changed and improved with new technology and new business model approaches. So started a fund called Axion Venture Lab. Led that for about 5 or 6 years, invested in nearly 30 companies around the world. And came to my current business of Shortlist, realizing that as much as we would give these companies money, their biggest problems and biggest barriers to scale were often people and talent related. And whereas human capital and talent's the foundation of any business anywhere in the world, for whatever reason, we find that money tends to get focused on probably 50 or 100 times as often as talent is. And set up Shortlist about 8 years ago, trying to address that problem. Frankly, a journey where we weren't sure where we would end up, but knowing we wanted to address this issue of how can all of these high impact, high innovation companies working across Africa get access to the best talent in a way that's affordable and cost effective. And that was what kind of has been animating our journey over the last 8 years.
Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned after college, you spent a lot of time working overseas and saw how businesses can be used as a force for good, which has led you to what you're doing now. So you moved from the United States to Africa. So maybe we can touch on that in terms of what was the specific reason for moving to Africa?
Yeah. And actually, I would say India was the step in between. it was really during law school for me that I started to hear and read much more about stories of business models, particularly in the microfinance and financial services space, being a power for good. I think before that time, I had this somewhat naive notion of capitalism and business as this destructive force causing a lot of the world's ills. But at the same time, you also know you can't ignore capital markets. You can't ignore business. It's such an important part of what shapes the world we live in. I had initially found a foothold here during law school working on setting up a U.S.-focused, a U.S.-centric community development bank, providing small business loans, nonprofit loans, financial services to low-income households in the state of Connecticut. And it was really that initial experience that got me interested in where these kinds of ideas might apply more broadly. This was in the years 2004, 2005, when microfinance was really on the rise. And so microfinance was that first step for me. I was fortunate enough to get a chance to go take an internship in India that actually evolved into a full-time multi-year job, but got an internship at a company in India, just as India was kind of crossing this chasm from microfinance being a very nonprofit NGO type activity to actually becoming for-profit regulated financial institutions, taking on capital and trying to grow not just with good intentions, but with real capital and operations and discipline behind it as well. So it was really that initial jump into India, which then led to me also doing work in microfinance in East Africa, and then eventually, as I mentioned, investing really actively across India, Africa, and a couple of other regions.
So you've mentioned in terms of microfinance was the step that led you to Africa. If we look at it from the perspective of Shortlist and what you do, how did you identify the need for this business and what is it specifically you aim to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, what my co-founders and I, who we had all been working with social enterprises, startups in emerging markets in various ways. My co-founder Simon had focused primarily on clean energy startups across Africa and Asia. I had focused primarily on financial inclusion. We realized that the lowest common denominator of success or failure in these companies was being driven off people. And oftentimes, we would come in at the level of money, we'd invest, we'd go to that first board meeting, and then immediately all the problems were around team building. And that's up at an executive level, all the way down to junior workforce issues. And as an investor, you're looking for solutions for your portfolio. And as we were exploring what was out there, we realized that this was still a very undeveloped sector. There weren't a lot of reliable, affordable professional services firms serving this segment. There weren't a lot of accessible, functional software or technology solutions, making it easier to get to know candidates. And so decided that this was an area that was going to be a big one to our overall mission of trying to make sure that businesses can be this force for good that we want to see. The journey of what Shortlist has become over time has, of course, changed. And I think this has been one of our strengths is we've always been loyal to the problem, not necessarily what solution we apply. Initially, the business we built was very software-centric. We built a platform that focused on automating and engaging candidate screening in more effective ways. So we would build chatbots and skills assessments and different ways that we could collect information and assess candidates and be this intelligence layer sitting in between kind of the chaos of job boards and actual precious time making hiring decisions. So we initially started there. As our business has gone on, I'm happy to get into it. We focused much more. We've realized that the need is a much more hands-on need, and so we've become much more a strategic partner to our to over 1,000 companies that we work with, providing senior executive search services. But then we also think at a more systems level about where we can help unblock different workforce challenges, opening up economic growth and job creation in sectors like renewable energy, green economy, and the digital remote workforce, which I think can be a huge job creator for the African continent.
Okay, so you mentioned something key that the success and failure of a business is driven by people, which is something that you're aiming to address. And at Shortlist, you have two core offerings, which are Shortlist Search and Shortlist Future. Do you mind giving us a bit more information about each of those offerings?
Sure. Where we started years ago was trying to build almost a one-size-fits-all solution to address the human capital needs of all these different companies and nonprofits and organizations we're working with across the continent. Over time, we've realized that there's really two distinct problems we want to address. One is at a leadership level. We were noting that the highest leverage positions in organizations are often getting the right leaders in place at the critical moments in a startup's journey. So Shortlist Search, what we've tried to do is certainly build and design tech and candidate intelligence platforms that are taking advantage of the best tech available, but also just trying to build and learn from the most successful executive search models around the world and bring that and make it affordable to companies operating on the continent. So our exec search service, we've now got about 25 search consultants spread across Africa, working on at any given time 80 to 100 senior leadership hires for a range of startups, investors, nonprofits, foundations, and a range of other impactful and innovative organizations across Africa. And that's a very hands-on process. Of course, we actively use our database, but it's really a hands-on professional service that we're providing. That's not only finding the right candidates, but trying to feed in market intelligence, help our clients plan and understand where talent's going to come from, understand the demand dynamics and compensation benchmarking that might go into making a compelling offer and getting the right person and managing the overall process to get to a successful hire. On the other side, what we've realized is that there's a number of places where workforce challenges are holding back economic growth and potential for key sectors, and also holding back the potential for the best kinds of job creation. So Shortlist Futures, we think of as a workforce innovation lab, where what we're doing is trying to identify places where different workforce solutions could enable faster, better economic growth, faster, better job creation, and with that, higher social impact. So we have a cluster of activities and programs that we design and run with usually funders that are governments or donors or foundations. Clusters of activities around some of the key growth areas that we anticipate can fuel an exciting future for Africa's economies, but also create a lot of jobs. So the green economy and generally the green transition. So of course, clean energy and renewables, but also areas around biodiversity and conservation and climate adaptation and other areas, e-mobility. And so we have a number of programs where we're raising awareness among young people around what job opportunities are there, preparing young people for those jobs, and then actually making the link and getting people into these new growing sectors so that they can have fulfilling careers and so that the green economic potential can be realized. On the other hand, we also have been doing a lot of work around the global digital economy. We do think that the opportunity for remote digital work is going to be a really big opportunity to fuel careers on the continent. I think in general, the potential for more and more jobs to be created in the services sector is a really strong one. So we've been looking at a range of places where different functions in the global digital economy can be served by African youth, from at the more entry-level data annotation and data labeling up to more skills-based positions like software engineers, data scientists, and the rest. So we're running a number of programs trying to cultivate those opportunities for Africans, including trying to fill in some of where infrastructure gaps may be hindering the potential. So we actually run a laptop and remote work equipment finance initiative where we're providing laptops to people who are getting job offers but need to bring their own devices and don't have the money to go out and buy it on day one, and then getting repaid out of their wages over time. And so applying that to areas like laptops, power backups, things like that.
Thank you. I mean, it's safe to say there are quite a few talent employment platforms available these days. What would you say is Shortlist's value proposition, or what differentiates you from your competitors?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's different on each side of the business. On the Shortlist Search side, on the executive search side, I think our focus on candidate intelligence and our focus on client service, I think sets us apart, and the fact that we're local. The continent right now for exec search tends to be very fragmented with very small scale one-off consultants that you can find, or you go to a big global organization who wouldn't have local context and are often too expensive for most African organizations. I'd like to think that we are kind of this Goldilocks sweet spot answer that's right in between, that brings some of the best practices and the best technology and candidate intelligence from global markets, brings it to a global brand that, when you engage Shortlist, there's a certain quality standard that we're standing behind, but then is priced in a manner that's going to work and be balanced a bit more with what the local market expects. On the future side, I think the difference is that because we work with donors and governments, we are free to take more of a systems level and a systems level view and an impact orientation. So we actually don't sell our services to employers on the Shortlist Futures side, again, which is more workforce and junior talent oriented. We're actually designing programs that we're then running with donors and able to work with them to figure out how do we best solve these problems that we're trying to solve. And those problems could be, how do we make the green economy grow as fast as it possibly can? How can we make sure that the most number of Africans can benefit from the employment opportunities of these new sectors? And then how do we make sure that the employment is diverse, inclusive, and equitable in terms of the participation of different groups, particularly women?
So you've mentioned during the conversation how tech and data play a part in how the platform operates. But I'm assuming that there is a human touch to what you do as well. What would you say the human touch to your work is?
Yeah, and I think a lot of our journey over the last 8 years has been a process of figuring out how to get that balance right. When we started, we were all tech and oriented very much towards tools like chatbots and skills assessments to augment the data that you could have and assemble on candidates to figure out who's going to be the right fit. And our initial business model was much more of a software as a service business model. We licensed this to about 800 or so companies across Africa and a bit in India as well. I think as time moved on, we realized that our clients needed more. Not only did they need help making sure they could get the most out of the platform, but really advice and guidance on best practices of hiring, what talent pools to target, what kinds of organizations would be the right place to go find the kinds of talent they're looking for, and a variety of other points in the kind of talent acquisition cycle. So we still do use our platform, which has nearly 1,000 assessments, has a really easy to configure chatbot, which then can funnel data in a structured way. We've realized that to have the biggest impact, we needed to lean into becoming a world-class professional services firm. We needed to hire people that are incredibly smart, are excited to engage with clients and solve their problems, coming from a range of backgrounds that often aren't recruited. A lot of the people that are most successful at Shortlist are coming from entrepreneurial backgrounds, startup operational roles, investor roles, management consulting, areas like that. And so I think it's really been cultivating that human touch side that has enabled us to build the kinds of relationships and have the kind of impact we're able to have. with companies. But it's always a balance. And I think I've seen this across a lot of our business, many other sectors. Even in financial inclusion, when I was an investor, this tech versus touch dynamic is one that is so critical to get right. If you over focus on hoping tech can solve your problems, you're often disappointed. Whereas the businesses that break through are usually the ones that are combining some of the benefits and scalability of tech, but very much not forgetting the human in the loop and the human touch side of things.
Yeah. So would you say that the human touch is essential for being successful in the African market?
I think in general, yeah, I'm sure there's exceptions, but I would say this is true across a number of markets. We see the same thing in India, where people are still more comfortable dealing with humans. It's still a service first economies rather than tech. I am American. I still spend some time back in the US. Americans, and I think it's true in a lot of countries, are very comfortable going and finding a software solution on a website, plugging in their credit card, and just getting to work and never speaking to a human. That is very unusual in my experience in Africa, where most times in most places, people want to know the human behind the service you're getting. Yes. They want to talk to a person first. They want to know that there's someone who will answer their WhatsApp or answer their phone call, who they can yell at when things break. I don't think there's the same trust and comfort in tech. And so, yeah, the companies that work, I feel like almost always have figured out and put at the very center of their business model, human engagement, a service, making sure people are getting the value they want.
I agree. I guess partnerships and community would probably come under the human touch. So how important are partnerships with regards to what you do?
Incredibly important, particularly on our Shortlist Futures side. Very frequently, as we're designing programs, trying to get more Africans to work in these growth sectors, we're doing it through partnerships. We have no illusion that we can do everything. At an early point in our journey, we considered, should we try to become an all-in-one training and placement workforce platform? And instead decided that we could focus on the things that we could do particularly well, things like awareness building and talent assessment, but that for a lot of the training and talent development side of things, we'd be much better off working with partners and having the flexibility to choose from whoever the very best providers might be for any particular niche area that we're getting into. So we work with a range of terrific training organizations. We work with a range of different, what we call sourcing partners, NGOs and different organizations that have access to and engage with youth across a lot of different markets, where we can try to promote what opportunities are available, share insights about where jobs of the future are going to come from, provide training resources and programs. And then, of course, with the funding community. And so we work very actively with a number of different governments, with multilaterals and with private foundations who are in different ways supporting the work, either with funding or expertise or other resources to try to make sure these programs work. So in some ways, we view ourselves as someone stitching together different organizations and different resources to try to have the most impact that we can on the continent.
In the early parts of your journey, how did you go about identifying and forming the key partnerships?
Luckily, my co-founder and I came from backgrounds where we had been investing in these markets and in these sectors for a long time. So no doubt, when we got onto this, we were doing this with the benefit of a lot of longstanding partnerships and relationships that could inform where our work could have the most impact, but also get us started and actually trust us as initial clients, partners, and funders. As we've gone, of course, we're very focused on the problem, and we go find whatever partners we need to go solve the problems we're looking at. So at the moment, for example, we have been running for about 5 years now a couple of different programs. One that's called Energy Access Talent Initiative, the other that's called Women for Green Jobs, both broadly oriented at getting more young people, and particularly young women, into jobs in the clean energy sector. At the moment, we're realizing the opportunity is much broader than clean energy. And so we're broadening our programming quite a bit to encompass a range of climate relevant sectors, areas like e-mobility and blue economy and direct air capture for carbon, and a number of other green manufacturing and other industries that we see as potential growth areas for different African economies. And so we're actually kind of going out and figuring out who's out there doing good work. What are the big organizations we need to be a part of? Who's training at the university level or at the private training level for these positions, and kind of knitting those together to try to figure out how to reach the most people and get the most people into these jobs and the most people prepared. So as these investments come, the human capital foundation will be ready.
Brilliant. So sticking with the theme of partnerships, you do work with donors, governments, enterprises, educational institutions. So how do you navigate the complex landscape of these partnerships to implement the work that you're doing effectively?
Getting these partnerships and these relationships right is critical. I think one of the most important things is listening and being aware of what problems different people are trying to solve. If you take too broad a brush stroke on this or that organization's trying to address climate change, I think what we see is we need to get much more granular with understanding the particular points of view, the language, the ambitions of particular organizations, and even within them, particular people, so that we can make sure that we're responding to what people need. I think many of our programs have multiple stakeholders involved, have multiple funders. And so part of getting these right is making sure there's open lines of communication and getting people on the same page, but also creating some room for customization so that each participant can get out of the program what they need. So yeah, really just listening and making sure we're effectively juggling and responding to the different needs of partners.
So would you say, are there any unique challenges that you've encountered in the African market that you've probably not encountered outside with regards to the search services, whether it's for startups or impact organizations in Africa?
Well, what I would say, less about executive search and more about the broader workforce dynamics, is Africa's really in a unique situation in terms of having so many young people entering the workforce. I mean, there's more people entering the African workforce in the coming decade than the rest of the world combined. And that being paired with not having the same number of jobs coming into the formal sector to keep up with this. I mean, there's estimates that maybe for every 5 people that enter the workforce, perhaps one formal job will be created. So I think what's quite unique here is in a lot of other markets, particularly markets that are facing declining demographics, shrinking populations. The name of the game is more trying to reskill and upskill the workforce so that it can meet the needs. In Africa, you don't really have a workforce or a training problem. You really just have a jobs problem. And so what's unique here is the number of different angles you need to take to address this. And so I also sit on the board of a great organization called Job Tech Alliance, where the focus is broadly less about helping people get full-time jobs and more using technology to intermediate gigs and a more diversified portfolio of work for young people to make ends meet. We, of course, are working to try to cultivate the development of sectors like the climate and clean energy sectors, which we think, if successful in growing the way we think they can be huge job creators. And then we have to be looking abroad for where is there labor demand that could plausibly be filled by young Africans. And I know you've had in the past other folks working on this issue, bridging the tech talent divide between the supply of tech talent that exists in the continent and the emerging demand for tech talent in a variety of other European, American, and other markets around the world. So I think those dynamics are very unique, but ever more urgent to be addressing.
As you mentioned, a lot of African countries are experiencing a talent boom within the youth population, and we're seeing in Europe and America, we are seeing talent shortages in certain areas or sectors. So what are some of the interesting opportunities that you're seeing for African youth that are emerging?
Yeah, I think what we're most excited about are opportunities in the green economy more broadly. The world stands at this unique moment where it's facing a true climate crisis and needs to try to get as close to net zero in terms of carbon emissions as possible by 2050. I think increasingly I'm of the view, and I think many people are of the view, that the world can't get there without Africa's help. Africa combines and has a few key things that's really unique in the world. It has some of the richest natural resources anywhere on planet Earth. It has some of the most untapped renewables across all categories, solar, wind, geothermal, et cetera. The opportunities there are massive. And then, of course, a booming youth workforce. Those could actually be brought together in ways to help a lot of the heavy carbon emitting industries that are around the world actually be brought to Africa and be done in a much more green way, powered by green energy, even in energy intensive industries like steel and aluminum and things like that. So the opportunity for green industrialization in Africa, I think, is a big one, as well as opportunities for countries like Kenya, for example, to be a net negative emitter. There's such great geothermal and other power reserves that could power direct air capture of carbon. And Kenya has this geological structure that it makes it a really great place to then store away and sequester that carbon for a long, long time. If countries like Kenya could take advantage of that and actually be a net negative emitter, we're going to need that in order to achieve some of these global goals. What that means for youth in Africa is, we hope, a lot of different jobs being directly created by green industry, by renewables, solar installers, wind turbine engineers, as well as a lot of downstream jobs that are created, whether that's new approaches to agriculture and productivity that become possible, productively using access to energy to run smaller businesses and do things in that manner. So I think there's a universe of opportunities that are coming from the green economic promise in Africa.
In order to access these opportunities, it does require investment. How do you believe we can invest in Africa's human capital to ensure that we increase opportunities like these on the continent?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a variety of chicken and egg problems that we have. No question that all of the things we're talking about depend on financial investments coming in from around the world, capital being mobilized, depends on the right policy structures being in place. But all of this working out also depends on the right human capital foundation being in place. We need a workforce ready and aware about these opportunities, skilled up for these opportunities, because ultimately some of these investments and some of these industries won't materialize and grow unless people are confident they can actually hire people in an affordable way to execute this and to build this future we're thinking of. So I think it's right now there's a component to which talent issues are downstream from investment and policy, and we're very actively working with different partners who are putting in place the money and the policy, and then looking to us to make sure the workforce is ready. But we're also, I think, in some ways trying to play a precursor and trying to make sure that we're getting out ahead of likely industry needs, so that as those decisions are getting made on money, on policy, people can look to these countries and say, oh, great, okay, there's actual people working on the skill level. We know we've got people mobilized for these jobs. If we get these other pieces of the puzzle in place, the talent and the human capital side will be ready.
Fantastic. So if we look specifically at Shortlist, what type of opportunities would you say are currently available via the platform?
Yeah, so and it comes in a couple. Like I mentioned, on the exec search side, at any given time, we're working on 80 to 100 senior executive searches, very hands-on hunts for C-suite and C-1 executives. And those, the best way to get in touch is more directly with me or any of my colleagues via our website or any other mode. We've recently launched the Africa Climate Careers Network, that kind of is the umbrella organizing site for a variety of our climate-related talent programs. This features a bunch of free resources for young Africans trying to transition into the green economy. So different free webinars, training courses, intro to climate courses, networking opportunities. We also have the continent's biggest climate-focused job board with, I think at present, over 1,500 verified jobs across over 100 climate organizations on the continent. And so that's an easy place to look at what are the aggregated opportunities available. Some of those are clients we work with directly, and we help find their workforce. Others are ones we just provide a lead so that we can try to provide the most comprehensive set of opportunities to youth on the continent, and a variety of other kind of resources available through ACCN. On the digital job side, we work with a variety of partners who are working across the data labeling, data annotation, digital customer service spaces, as well as up the value chain into other software engineering and data analysis and data science realms. And so that's all could be found on our website.
So are there any specific industries or sectors that you're seeing more demand for?
Yeah, I think right now on the climate side, clean energy continues to be expanding, but there's been a lot of excitement about the potential for e-mobility. We've seen, with Move getting funded and Basic-Go and a number of other exciting announcements. There's a lot in the electric scooter world with big funding announcements. So we are seeing a lot of growth around e-mobility. And I think more nascent, we're seeing a number of areas related to urban infrastructure, regenerative agriculture, a number of sectors on the rise there. I think this will continue to be a very dynamic space, though, and a lot's changing month to month as we move forward.
Fantastic. So as you mentioned, you're seeing a trend or growth in areas such as clean energy and e-mobility. So keeping on the theme of trends, are there any current trends that you're seeing in Africa's recruitment landscape that you're probably not seeing in the rest of the world that you are excited about?
Yeah, excited and have some nervousness about the role of philanthropy and donors in the space. I think what's unique is in Africa is there's more and more governments and donors who have identified youth employment, employability issues, particularly with the booming youth workforce of Africa, as being an important public policy issue to get out ahead of, and something that we should be investing in as an area of public concern. I think with all of these young people entering the workforce, it could be a terrific opportunity if productivity can stay high to drive economic growth and opportunity for Africa. It's also scary if people are not able to find employment in ways that meet the opportunity. I think what's interesting is the variety of ways that funders are getting involved, and some of them with very big tickets. So I think one of the things that we're focused on is trying to make sure that there's the right blend, both in our programming, but across the workforce space, between efforts that are looking at scale and number of jobs created and measure success almost at the cost effectiveness of how easily someone can be found employment or a job versus the depth of that impact and the income increase over time. A lot of the work that we do is focused, it's not necessarily in the hundreds of thousands of jobs created. It might be in the hundreds or the thousands of jobs created, but it's focused on career track formal sector employment, areas where getting a job today can yield 5 to 10x income increases over a 3 to 5 year period, with genuine career potential, long-term stability benefits. So I think what I'm hoping is that as we all try to, it's terrific and promising that there's a number of foundations and governments wanting to invest in this space. I just hope we can find the right balance and create a range of possibilities that ensure as many people as possible get jobs and income growth, but also that we focus on economic mobility, income increases over time, genuine mobility and progress over time.
Thank you for sharing that. So if we go from current trends and look at the future, where do you see Africa in 5 years' time from a online recruitment search perspective?
On the exec search side, we continue to see a real expansion of demand for what we do. I think that economies are growing, and as the talent markets get more and more sophisticated, organizations like ours that can help companies that are growing or even foreign companies that are coming and setting up, helping navigate where to find people, how to engage, the difference between different backgrounds and organizations and educational experiences and things like that will only become more important. We talk a lot about for our executive search work, we're not competing with other firms so much as we're all trying to grow the pie. So we're not fighting over slices of the pie. We're trying to grow the fact that there's a lot of organizations today that don't think they can afford or don't think they need executive search services that when we get a chance to work with them, often feel, oh, yes, okay, we actually need Shortlist or someone like Shortlist as a partner for the work we do. Of course, on the Shortlist Futures side, it's going to be a very dynamic time in terms of how we rise up to meet the boom in the workforce and try to match that to where we see the economic growth potential of different sectors. So the next 5 years, I think it would be critically important to starting to put some of those puzzle pieces together, get momentum going, particularly as we think about the investments required for a successful green economic transition across Africa, as well as further cementing the brand of African talent for the global services market. Some of the work we're doing is focused on this whole global business services market, BPOs, customer service, et cetera. Today, African talent represents only 2% of that global workforce. But increasingly, African talent is going to be a huge portion of the actual digitally enabled young workforce. We need to see Africa capture more of those jobs. And to do that, I think continuing to invest in and grow brand Africa around the world with these big organizations is going to be critically important.
Brilliant, and I look forward to seeing it develop in the near future, Paul. Thank you for sharing that.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
I would say one of our core values, and one that I find myself reciting to myself more than any other, is find the adventure. I think life throws a lot of curveballs at us, and how you respond to those and whether you take those challenges and get depressed about them or take them as as opportunities to rise up and turn them into things that are not barriers to overcome, but chances to have an adventurous life and try something new, the better. And certainly it's helped me in my career, pushed me to kind of zig maybe when others are zagging and to continually try to find interesting problems to work on with great people.
Brilliant. Spoken like a true entrepreneur. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Paul. We've come to the end of today's conversation. It's been a great conversation. I was wondering if you had any closing remarks, final course of action for people who are interested in the work that you're doing at Shortlist or just interested in the whole executive search recruitment space in Africa.
Yeah, just grateful that you do this work. Love your podcast. Thanks for having me on it. And if people want to learn more, probably easiest to find us at our website, shortlist.net, or find me on LinkedIn. I pride myself on being as responsive as I possibly can. Would love to talk to anyone who's interested in topics around African workforce, senior hiring for African organizations, or hit me up if people come through Nairobi.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul, for sharing your insights in terms of what Shortlist is doing, transforming executive search services and also pioneering some of those youth employment solutions that we discussed today. So looking forward to seeing how Shortlist continues to drive that positive change across the continent's employment landscape.
Thanks so much for having me.
Speak soon.
All right. Take care, Trisha. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.